The patterns of global migration reveal an uncomfortable truth that few are willing to discuss openly. Not all land is created equal, and the West's dominance isn't merely historical accidents, it's geographical destiny. The question, why do only Western countries have mass migration, misses the deeper reality. These regions attract migration because they occupy the most valuable real estate on Earth. Land so abundant and fertile that its current population represents a dramatic underutilization of its potential. If you know how great European geography is, it would be no surprise to you how this continent conquered the world and made the most precious land across the seas into extensions of their civilization. Consider this striking fact. In 1900, when Europeans comprised their largest share of global population at roughly 25%, they numbered approximately 400 million, the same as China's population at the time. Yet China occupied a fraction of the land area. Today, Europe's population sits at around 750 million across 10.2 million square kilometers, while Asia houses 4.7 billion people on 44.5 million square kilometers. The discrepancy becomes even more stark when we examine population density. India currently maintains a population density of 497 people per square kilometer. If Europe matched this density across its 10 million square kilometers, it would house over 5 billion people, nearly 7 times its current population. The United States, with its 9 million square kilometers of land area, could theoretically support 4.5 billion people at India's density, more than half the current world population within a single nation's borders. These aren't just abstract calculations. They reveal the fundamental geographic inequality that drives migration patterns worldwide. The West sits on land that could support billions more people than currently live there, while much of the developing world struggles to support existing populations on far less hospitable terrain. The agricultural data paints an even clearer picture. According to 2021 cropland statistics, Asia possesses 37% of global cropland despite having the smallest average farm sizes and facing intense land scarcity. The Americas control 24%, Africa 19%, and Europe 18%, and Oceania 2%. When we account for population distribution, the West's advantage becomes overwhelming. Europe and North America combined represent roughly 42% of world's prime agricultural land, while housing only about 14% of global population. This isn't merely about having farmland, it's about having the best farmland, with optimal rainfall, temperate climates, deep topsoil, and extended growing seasons. The Canadian prairies, American Midwest, and European plain constitute some of the most naturally productive agricultural regions in human history, requiring minimal inputs to yield abundant harvests. Compare this to much of Asia, where rice cultivation in marginal lands requires intensive labor, or to Africa, where soil depletion and erratic rainfall create chronic food insecurity. The geographic lottery has already been won, and Western nations hold the winning ticket. The observation that Western-level immigration hasn't happened in East Asia because it hasn't been profitable enough yet cuts to the core of migration economics. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan have achieved remarkable prosperity, yet they only attract modest immigration compared to Western nations. The reason is spatial. These countries have already maximized their geographic carrying capacity under current technological conditions. Japan's 125 million people occupy 377,000 square kilometers, a density of 331 people per square kilometer, and most of that population concentrates in coastal urban corridors because the mountainous interior remains largely uninhabitable. There's simply nowhere to put massive amounts of new arrivals without drastically reducing quality of life. South Korea faces similar constraints with 527 people per square kilometer squeezed into the habitable portions of its territory. Western nations face no such constraints. Canada, with 4 people per square kilometer, could increase its population 50-fold and still have lower density than modern Japan. The United States could triple its population and remain less dense than Germany. The geographic capacity exists. Only political will and cultural resistance stand in the way. Even if both the American and European economy were to collapse, migration to the Northern Hemisphere would continue just for the climate alone. Climate models project that by 2100, regions within 30 degrees of the equator may experience lethal heat events with increasing frequency, temperatures and humidity levels that exceed human physiological tolerance even in shade. The northern United States, Canada, and northern Europe occupy what climate scientists are calling the climate refugee zone, temperature latitudes that will actually benefit from moderate warming through longer growing seasons and reduced heating costs, while avoiding the catastrophic impacts projected for equatorial and subtropical regions. As much of the global south becomes increasingly uninhabitable, the climate advantage of northern latitudes will create migration pressure that dwarfs anything seen in human history. Current estimates suggest that climate change could displace between 200 million and 1 billion people by 2050, depending on mitigation efforts and adaptation success. The vast majority of these climate refugees will seek to move north, toward exactly those regions that already possess the greatest geographic advantages. The trickle will become a flood. The correlation between temperate climates and economic development is one of the most robust patterns in global economics. Though the causal mechanisms remain debated, of the world's 35 high-income countries as defined by the World Bank, 32 are located in temperate or cold climate zones, with only Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE as tropical or desert exceptions, and the latter two owe their wealth entirely to fossil fuel extraction rather than diversified development. Temperate regions benefit from what agricultural scientists call the Goldilocks zone. For conventional agriculture, enough warmth for robust growing seasons, with winter freezes that kill pests, break disease cycles, and allow soil to regenerate. The American Midwest, European breadbasket, and Ukrainian steppes share common advantages: deep, rich topsoil developed over millennia, adequate rainfall distributed throughout growing seasons, and winter dormancy that naturally controls agricultural pests without intensive chemical intervention. To put things shortly, the West has the greatest farmland and climate in the world that people from every part of the world are desperate to move to. There is nowhere else where immigration is as profitable and seductive. There is nowhere else where entire megacities could so easily flourish. Nowhere else where wealth and abundance could be as easily created in these lands through settlement migration. This is why the United States and the settler countries of the West were formed in the first place. Human beings respond to incentives. When the incentive for further expansion and settlement of the underpopulated Western countries reaches an order of magnitude or more, no wall can hold back the tide indefinitely. Profit does not care for maintaining the existing ethnic foundations. The geographic advantage of Western lands creates economic opportunities that generate irresistible pull factors. Western nations cannot eliminate the fundamental attraction they represent to potential migrants and how much the capitalists gain from inviting them in. North America in particular could be home to the most populated and industrious state ever. 2 billion people and the greatest megacities would fit easier here than anywhere else, but it's used instead for car parks. Drive through the American Midwest and you'll pass through thousands of miles of underutilized land. Small towns declining, farmland idling, space used for storage and parking rather than production and habitation. Current urban theory suggests that cities become more productive as they grow, experiencing increasing returns to scale in innovation and economic output. Yet North American cities remain remarkably sparse by global standards. Greater Toronto, one of North America's densest metropolitan regions, houses 6.4 million people across 7,000 square kilometers, a density of 900 per square kilometer. Greater Tokyo houses 37 million across 13,000 square kilometers, a density of 2,780 per square kilometer. Tokyo's metro area is 3 times as dense while maintaining higher per capita incomes and superior quality of life by many metrics. If North American metropolitan areas adopted Tokyo-level densities while maintaining their superior climate, natural resources, and geographic position, they could house populations of unprecedented scale. A Toronto with Tokyo's density would have 19 million people. Greater New York could house 60 million. Los Angeles could accommodate 45 million. These megacities would possess economic firepower unlike anything in human history, benefiting from agglomeration effects while sitting atop the richest resource base on Earth. Many commentators on Twitter can see a world where immigrants make up the majority of Canada, and they vote to become part of the United States for greater economic opportunity. This scenario, while provocative, follows a logical progression. Canada's current population of 39 million occupies 9 million square kilometers, among the lowest population densities on Earth. The Canadian government has already announced plans to welcome 500,000 immigrants annually, and with the rate of exponential growth in migration, Canada could house 100 million people by 2060. As immigration transforms Canadian demographics, political calculations will shift. New Canadians, lacking deep attachment to British parliamentary traditions or the symbolic monarchy, may increasingly question why they accept lower wages and fewer opportunities than Americans in comparable climates just across the border. The current 25% wage gap between comparable Canadian and American workers represents billions in lost earnings for Canada's workforce annually. If Canadian population swells towards 100 million by 2060, as projected under current immigration policies, with the majority being first or second generation immigrants, a referendum on joining the United States becomes plausible. The combined population could approach 500 million by this time, creating a continental superpower with the geographic scale of Russia, the economic dynamism of America, and the resource wealth of both, stretching from the tropics to the Arctic, encompassing the world's most productive agricultural lands and possessing both Atlantic and Pacific coastlines. This entity would dominate the global order for centuries. This new North America, because of its overwhelming immigrant background population, would mark the beginning of the return to an open border and frontier settlement nation, a new form of manifest destiny as millions pour in to fuel the new wave of American interior settlement and colonization. The imperial core, as some people call the United States, it's the only reason why Western civilization still rules the world for now. But America is increasingly shifting from being an extension of Europe, populated by majority Europeans, to a Pacific-oriented empire that pulls basically the entirety of its subjects to fuel its expansion from outside of the West, since Europeans are no longer interested, nor do they have the population access to settle and develop the world. I don't believe Europe's global dominance from 1500 to 1945 stemmed mainly from cultural superiority or genetic advantage. It mostly flowed directly from geographic blessings. European agriculture generated surpluses that funded state formation, armies, and navies. Europe's geography featured countless natural harbors and navigable rivers that reduced transportation costs and enabled trade. Its fragmented political landscape created competition that drove innovation. Its position at the western edge of Eurasia made it the last stop for technologies and ideas flowing west from Asia, while its Atlantic position made it the starting point for westward expansion. The same geographic advantages that enabled European colonialism continue to drive immigration today. The land itself remains the prize, and those who control it retain structural advantages regardless of temporary economic fluctuations or political upheavals. The trends are clear and accelerating. Western nations will continue to attract immigration in increasing volumes because the geographic differential is unbridgeable through any policy short of deliberate civilizational suicide. Climate change could intensify these flows as equatorial regions become less habitable. The current Western population of roughly 1 billion could swell toward 2 billion by 2100, or even 3 billion, depending on where you define where the West ends and where the West begins, whether you count only Europe, and if you don't consider the Americas to be part of Western civilization. It's understandable that as the United States becomes minority European descendants, it may get similar treatment to Brazil and the Latin American countries, consider their own unique civilization, just with European influence and heritage. Living standards for the median Western citizen will likely decline as this transition unfolds, and start to reflect more what the rest of the world looks like. more competition on housing, greater pressure on wages, increased strain on infrastructure and services. Yet even reduced living standards in the West will likely exceed those available in third world and developing regions, maintaining the migration incentive. The West cannot become poor in absolute terms as long as it controls the geographic high ground. This transformation will fundamentally alter Western societies, creating majority-minority nations where founding populations become demographic minorities in their ancestral homelands. The political, cultural, and social implications will fuel radicalization, mass instability, and violence, and the destruction of much culture. We stand at the beginning of the greatest population movement in human history, driven not by war or persecution, but by the simple fact that some land is vastly more valuable than other land, and lines on a map cannot indefinitely prevent people from moving toward opportunity. The age of geographic destiny is upon us, and its implications will reshape human civilization.